Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. I'm going back in time now. I picked up a fishing reel recently. It's been on my desk waiting to be done. It's a Penn Squidder. It's a model 140. It's the long chassis. It's the older version of the reel with the burgundy side plates, and it's a reel that was well ahead of its time. I'm thinking back into the 60s now when I remember an uncle of mine who was an avid fisherman coming home one day with the Penn Squidder and bragging about the latest technology, which includes ball bearings on both sides and a great casting ability with the wide frame. So I'm going to show you how to take this apart, service it, and put it back into use. This one I got at a local flea market. It's got a little bit of burring noise, which generally suggests that probably hasn't been worked on in a while. And we'll just go ahead and show you how to do that. So this reel features the one screw take apart system for the side plate. We're going to go ahead and do that. You remove it counterclockwise, pull it out, and a brief twist. Now when I bought this reel, I made a point of taking this side plate off to see what the interior of the reel looked like. I did that with the permission of the seller. I had asked them, would you mind if I take this apart to see? Don't do this by yourself without asking. You can get some pretty upset sellers, and in particularly if they're asking a price that you want to negotiate, you may lose some negotiation power there. They're very much afraid, if they don't know the reel, very much afraid you're going to break it or something. Okay, so we're going to take the spool out and we'll work on the bearing side, non-gear side. Do that, just poke the spool through. This has got a metal spool. There's three types of spools available for this. At the time of manufacture, there was only two. There was the metal spool, and then there was a plastic spool. And the plastic spool was designed for long casting because it had lighter weight and was going to turn faster. This is a bearing, so again, it was ahead of its time. We're just going to go clean up some of that residual grease that's sitting in there. And since it's a bearing, we're going to oil that. And I use a Real X oil to do that. Put a little bearing bath in there just because it's been a while. And then just where this spool seats, I'm just going to put a little bit of blue grease. The blue grease I use is a Penn Precision Reel Grease, but any reel grease that's been designed for fishing reels will work. I caution you against using general purpose greases or automotive greases since you won't know what the viscosity on those is, and you won't know particularly whether it's going to be appropriate for the reel itself. I've taken some reels apart that have had automotive greases in there, and they've just been a disaster. Okay, I'm going to put some grease on the other tail of the spool while I'm at it. Let's go over to the bearing, over to the gear side then, as I mentioned. This is a high quality one. This is probably chrome steel, but it could be stainless, I'm not sure. At any rate, it's in good condition. So let's take this apart, show you how to service this end of the reel. And I'm going to replace the drags. I went ahead and ordered new HT100 fabric drags. I'm assuming that the drags that are in here are the older variety that are fabric and kind of get pressed down to feel like rubber. And so in order to do that, we have to take the side plate out. The side plate disassembly starts by removing the set screw on the nut. And then I use an aftermarket wrench. It's available through pennparts.com. It's longer and thicker than the one that's provided with the reel. However, if you don't do a lot of reel service and you happen to have that reel, and it's the only one you're working on, and you have the Penn wrench, don't go out and buy one. That wrench will work just fine. But I find that if you do a lot of it, this one's more comfortable. It's easier to work with, and it's certainly paid off in dividends over time. Again, that one's available at pennparts.com if you like. Okay, so I took the handle off. I took the star drag nut off. And now I can push this whole assembly through by removing these screws. So if you don't work on reels all the time, one of the things you might want to do is get the schematic of the reel, which shows the exploded view here. You can also take pictures along the way with your cell phone camera or a digital camera, but I would recommend doing that if you're not familiar with the assembly of the reel, only because there's an example. Only because there are different sequences here, different types of screws, and you want to make sure you're aware of it. Whoever did this reel the last time This screw does not belong up top. There are two different types of screws. There are let's see what we got here for the example. There's a partially threaded screw, which springs right on. Yes, so this one's fine. So you can see that there's two different screws here. This one's partially threaded, a spring inside on the yoke rides on this. The fully threaded screws belong below because they won't impair anything. But if you put that fully threaded screw above, it could catch on the spring and could cause the reel to perform poorly or the springs to age prematurely. Okay, once I turn all four of them off, then I know that I'm loose because the bridge assembly falls through. I've cupped my hand because there is an anti-reverse dog in here that has a spring on it, and in the event that it wants to go fly, it's going to hit my hand. It's not going to shoot across my workbench. So with that, I can push this through and remove the bridge top. And now I'm just looking for the anti-reverse dog. Here it is. And you can see that the spring inside the anti-reverse dog is intact, which is wonderful because we didn't lose it. Okay, so we're going to do a complete service on this. I'm going to remove, that came off easy enough, remove the gear drive, the ferrule, and I'm even going to pull this. This is the gear sleeve, and I'll show you how to do that. But if you're doing a full service on the reel, you want to remove that sleeve and make sure that the post underneath is clean and lubricated. This sleeve rides on a post that's crimped onto the bridge, and it has a little retaining pin in here. You push it using a pin, a toothpick, finishing nail, something small that you can get in there and move that pin along. I guess you could even use another one of these pins if you had a spare pin laying around. But you pull that off, and then you can pull the gear sleeve off. And in this case, this mirrors the outside. This is a very clean reel. You can see the groove that pin rides in here. We're just going to clean up any debris. In this case, this is a very clean reel, which is what I noticed when I went to purchase it. And then I'm just going to grab a little bit of blue grease to put on that sleeve. I don't want to put too much in there because it could get contaminated and trap stuff. Put the sleeve right back on, grab that little pin, and put that in. Now if that sleeve was worn either externally or internally, sometimes it gets worn here when you go to put the screw back in for the handle. If either one of those was worn, you could get those as replacement parts. That's one of the beauties of this reel. It's been around a long time, but parts are still available. While I have this out, I'm going to check the spool gear just to make sure all of the teeth are okay, that they're not missing, chipped, bent, or anything else that would impede the performance of that reel. And then we're going to take the assembly apart for the drag stack. And usually you can just simply push it through. And this, these have the older gear, the older drags in it that I was thinking about. They kind of become rubber. This reel apparently was lightly used because these drags have been around a long time and they're still operable, and they really don't need to be replaced, but since I'm thinking of using this one myself, I'm going to go ahead and do the upgrade on the drags. I ordered these through penparts.com. They're the new HT100 fabric drags. Fabric drags get grease, and for the grease on that, I use a Cal's Universal Drag Grease to lubricate these. I just put a little bit on each side, and as you notice, I'm wearing a protective glove on my hand to keep contaminants out, but it also is a great way to work the grease into the drag washers. So that's what I'm doing right now. We're going to go ahead and put the drag stack right onto the bridge. We do that by putting that backing washer on first, then the metal gearing, and again you want to check this to make sure all the teeth are okay on this, which they are. I'm going to put that back, put the first of the washers in. Now the way that the metal washers work, there's a different one in the middle here that's called an ear washer, but you have a floating washer, round washer, eared washer, floating washer, and that eared washer in this case is always in the middle, and that's how that will hold for almost all of the Penn Long Beach Jig Masters, Beachmaster series reels. They all have a 3 metal washer setup, and in that 3 metal washer, the eared washer is always in the middle. Okay, same idea here. I put the grease on both sides, worked it in with that glove. Now we got the eared washer. The ear washer sits in indentations inside that metal drag, or the metal gear rather, sits inside there. That holds that one in place. That one does not turn, the other two turn. Last one up top again. Now we'll just do the same thing with the last one. And then the idea with the drag grease is to keep the drag washers flexible. So you don't have to over lube them, but you do want them flexible. And then we'll put the last one up top here. And then the collar washer that goes on top of that. So that's how you do the assembly. You take the spool gear, the gear sleeve off. You lube the post inside. You can put a little bit of oil in there if you like. Take the main gear off. Pull out all the washers, lube. Okay, so that assembly's done. I'm just going to set that to the side for a moment. As you notice, I use a parts bucket there for my small pieces and parts. It's nothing fancy. It's the bottom of a milk jug. However, it saves a lot of aggravation and time looking for pieces and parts if you just do what I'm doing right here, kind of haphazardly laying the pieces and parts out on my workbench. Okay, the springs I'm going to put inside. We got a little accumulated chunk in there, so again, I'm going to clean that up. I like to use a WD-40 or a penetrating oil just to loosen it a little bit. I go back to my cotton swabs for cleaning. That generally will help me get the accumulated junk, usually dried grease, off of this. Again, we got a burring on the other side now, so that's where it's kind of ahead of its time. It was uncommon in the 60s to find a lot of reels, particularly conventional reels that had the bearings in it. I'm going to go ahead and test the bearing in the back there. I do that by just taking a Phillips head screwdriver, making sure that the bearing turns, which it does. And because I heard a bearing noise before, I'm going to flood that with oil. I oil bearings. I'm going to flood that up pretty good in there. Just let that work its way through. So the last two pieces then is just the collar or yoke. That's got a lot of junk on it. I'm going to use a 4/0 steel wool there. That usually can get the grease off, and it is. It's a little aggressive, but it's not going to hurt the metal or damage it or scar it in any way. If you need it to be a little bit more, you could use an abrasive cleaner, such as a chrome metal polish, rust remover type of a thing. But you don't need a lot, and in this case, this is just grease. So if I needed to, I could work on that with the WD-40, and that would be fine. Okay, so we got our main pieces and parts together, so let's go reassemble this then. We've cleaned up everything, so we take the two springs, which I have in my convenient parts bucket. Want to put a little bit of blue grease onto the yoke. Make sure that that has enough for it to turn. Put some on both sides there. Grab the spool gear. Now the spool gear has two sides to it. One of them has indentations, one doesn't. The one that has the U-channel in it faces the spool, and that locks it in. So that always goes on the outside. We'll put that over here on the springs. Come around and grab the jack. And the jack just slips over like the other one did. We'll grab the bridge plate now, put that in. The bridge plate enables us to turn that 180 degrees, and you take your dog. That's the next part of the assemble. Fully threaded screw on the bottom. The dog rests on that. Slips behind the bridge plate, and then that little spring which is in the dog sits onto the post there, and then you complete the turn. When we reassemble, I like to do just a partial turn to get that threaded before I put the other 4 screws in. The other 3 of the 4 screws in. The ones that are partially threaded go up top. The fully threaded one goes below. Now we can tighten them all up once we have them seated. So the last part then is just putting the handle assembly back on. That starts with the ferrule that works on the drag sleeve. Next up is the star drag nut. Once that nut is on, we can put the handle back on and complete the tightening of the drag. Put the handle screw on. So one of the features on this reel, and it looked different for those of you that work on Penn reels, that looked a little bit different, was the dog. And so let's talk about that for a minute. This reel has the ability to release the anti-reverse so that you can backpedal on fighting a fish as opposed to tearing up your drags. And that's why that dog is set separately. And once I put this retaining screw in here, I'll just show you that feature. So that feature is one that just overrides it. So you can find that feature on the Super Mariners, the Model 340, the big game fishing reel, but you can also find it on this. And again, that's unusual. It's not unusual on a spinning reel, but it is unusual on a conventional reel. So that little trip lever is over here, and if you flip the reel this way, you can backpedal the reel. And if you flip it the other way, that's on, and you can hear the anti-reverse drag working. So this one's turning nicely. We're just going to go ahead, finish this assembly by taking the side plate, aligning it, the little tabs with the insert, turn it just a portion of a turn. Then we can finish the side plate nut. Okay, and we're off to go fishing. So if you have a Penn Squidder, I hope this has showed you how to do the maintenance on it. If you want to buy one, I hope it's been educational to you in terms of how this reel is made. And if you're going to take one apart and clean it up, I hope if you follow this video that you're able to do that relatively easily. So with that, I'm going to end the video. I appreciate you watching it. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Good luck fishing.